Alright, so in this challenge we're going to go ahead and try to reverse a name. And so let's go ahead and make sure that our environment is set up. Go ahead and make sure that you have the right URL for the challenge. And then after that, you're probably seeing a setup that looks something like this, where there's HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then there's the visual field down here. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and close down the HTML and CSS, and then what we want to do is we want to have the console available for your output to show up. And so this challenge is called Reverse a Name Challenge. So here's what we're doing. We're going to create a function that accepts a string of a person's first and last name and returns a string with the first and last name swapped. So some examples. The string John Smith should return a string that says Smith John. A string that says Albert Einstein should return a string that says Einstein Albert. And so I've already set you up with the function down below, a function called name shuffle, where the string is going to be the argument. And then we have the empty code block that you're going to fill out. And down below, when you feel like you have that code done, when you feel like you have that function built, you will just uncomment these and see if you get Smith John and Einstein Albert. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and solve this in a couple different ways, and that's just so you can kind of get used to seeing the ways that JavaScript can be used to get the result that you're looking for. So my first approach is that I am going to take that string and turn them into items in an array. And so because of that, I'm going to want to have an array container. So I'll go ahead and do that right now. I'll just go ahead and call this var backward name equals an empty array. And so the approach I'm going to take is I'm going to turn this string into an array of strings, and then I'm going to push the second item into our backward name first, and then I'm going to push the first item into our backward name second, and then I'm going to join it back together and return this new backward name array. So I've got our holder. The next thing I want to do is I need to turn this two-word string into an array with two string items. So I'll go ahead and do that by setting string equal to string.split. And something important to note is that if I do string.split and I only have and I have an empty space between the two single quotes, then that is going to split, for example, John Smith into an array with the string J, then the next item is a string O, then the next item is the string H. And so we don't want that. We want to split this into just two strings. So the way that we can do that and just grab the words is by putting a space between those two single quotes. Alright, so just to take a look at what we have in the console, let's say we have a string is equal to John Smith. And so if we did string.split and we didn't have any spaces, we would see that this is what happens to John Smith. Not what we want. Instead, we want string.split with a space between our two single quotes. And we do that, that's more of what we're looking for. So now that we've done that, the first thing I want to do is push our second value of Smith into the backward name array. And then the way that we'll do that is we'll say string at index 1. And so index 1 would be the second item in the array, and index 0 is the first item in the array. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then the second thing we want to do is now we want to push that first item into the second spot. So backward name.push, and we'll give it the value of string at index 0. Now that we've done that, we'll go ahead and return our backward name array. And one last thing that we want to do is, because these are two items in an array, is we want to join them back together. Again, we want to put a space between our two single quotes. And now that we've done that, let's go ahead and uncomment out. And the result is Smith John and Einstein Albert. So let's go ahead and let's make this code a little bit cleaner. One thing we could do is I'll comment this back out again. I'm going to take the second item and I'm going to just completely remove it. And what I can do is in this push method, I can put string of 0 as the second argument, and that should give us the same results. And it does. Smith John and Einstein Albert. So let's do a quick review. We initially set up an empty array named backward name. And then after that, we took our string that was originally 2 words, and we split it into an array with the first item being the first word and the second item being the second word. We then used the push method to push the second word or string of the array into the first spot of our backward name array. And then followed by that, we pushed our first item in the array into the second spot of the backward name array. We then returned our backward name array, which was 2 items, 2 strings in reverse, and we joined them back together into 1 string. Alright, now let's go ahead and let's take another approach at solving this. And this time we're going to use a for loop. So I'll go ahead and comment these out. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete all of this stuff in the middle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my string, and again I'm going to turn it into an array with 2 string items. And then after that, I'm going to go ahead and create another backward name array. And I'll set that equal to an empty array. And then now what I'm going to want to do is use a for loop to go through our string array and in reverse order place them into our new backward name array. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at how we would do that. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and use a for loop to do this. So we use our for keyword, and then we're going to initialize I to the value of 1. And because we're going in reverse, we're not going to use I being less than string.length as you may be kind of familiar with. Instead, we're going to say as long as I is greater than or equal to 0, that we're then going to go in to our code block below. And once we've gone through our code block, we're going to take I and we're going to subtract 1 from it. And then I will be a value of 0. And so if I is greater than or equal to 0, which is true, we'll go back into our code block again. And then we'll take 0 and subtract 1 from it, which is -1. And -1 is not greater than or equal to 0. So at that point, we'll break out of this code and we'll return our value for a backward name array. So let's see what code we need to have in here. We're going to want to take our backward name array and use the push method of string at the index of I. we know that this is going to start off with the number 1, which is Smith. So the first thing we're going to push into our backward name array is the word Smith. And then we'll go back. I is now -1, so I is 0. 0 is greater than or equal to 0. So backward name with the push method of string of 0 is John. So it's going to give us Smith John. Now again, this is returning an array with 2 separate strings. So what we'll need to do is the join method again and put our single quotes within it. Let's go ahead and uncomment out these 2 console.logs, and the result again that we get is Smith John and Einstein Albert. Alright, let's go ahead and do this challenge one more time, and we're going to do it in the most simple way possible. This might have been how you would have thought of approaching it in the beginning for efficiency's sake. We are simply going to use the split, join, and reverse method, all of them back to back. So we're going to return our string dot split, and by now you should know that we're going to have the single quote with the space in between it. And then we're going to use the reverse method on it to reverse those 2 items. And then we're going to use the join method again with our single quote with the space between it. Let's go ahead and take a look at this, and we got it. Smith John and Einstein Albert. Alright, thanks for taking a look at this challenge with me, and we'll see you with the next challenge.